Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. My name is Max Kiener. I was already introduced, so I lead the Institute for Ethics and Technology in Hamburg, and I'm already very pleased as an academic to feel comfortable in the armchair. So here's something that I think you all know. Today's technology isn't just about individual gadgets influencing only their users and in small ways. And AI in particular has this profound impact, so it affects what we consume, how we work, whom we meet, and even why we decide the way that we do. And that is something extraordinary because that concerns areas that used to be within the realm of states and subject to democratic control. But today, whoever is going to develop new technologies will shape these social, political, and individual realities, will shape civic participation, economic success, and democratic legitimacy, fundamental rights in one way or another. So that raises the question, how do we involve and include the public in that process of developing technology? More specifically, could there be a process of co-creation in which industry, developers, and policymakers team up with the public to get the best out of this cutting-edge technology without running into these major risks? And I'm really pleased to have a fantastic lineup of people who are here today to discuss this with me, and I'm going to ask them to come on stage, maybe one by one as I introduce them, and that gives me a little bit of time. So I start with Patrick Couch, AI Evangelist, and please a round of applause for Patrick.
Thank you.
So Patrick is, as he says, a humanist at heart.
That's correct.
And
educationally.
And educationally, and a business developer, and helps organizations with AI and high-performance computing initiatives. Trying to make these things not just tools for play, but agents for change. Our next panelist is Sennay Ghebreab. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thank you.
So Sennay is an associate professor of socially intelligent AI, so that promises to be very interesting, and focuses on how using AI could address social inequalities and different ways of participation. The next speaker is now a quick change, and I'm extremely happy to have him. Initially, we wanted to have Irakli, Khodeli, head of the AI ethics unit at UNESCO, but due to some delay, he couldn't make it. But we're very fortunate to have Professor Ted Lechterman with us. Ted, you're there. Okay. Please give a round of applause. So Ted is the chair in AI ethics and governance at IE University in Madrid. And fun fact, Ted is also an expert on the ethics of charity and is very charitable to us today to chip in at such short notice. Ted, it's a particular pleasure to have you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Max. Thanks.
Then we'll have with us today Dr. Randon Taylor, and there he is. Yep. So Randon's research delves, as he says, into the social determinants of health and explores how democratization and ethics can enhance social equity. And we're very pleased to have him and his perspective in this panel. And finally, we have Daniela Weber with us. Here she is. Yep. So Daniela is the director of the NetHope Center for Digital Nonprofit and works with nonprofit and tech companies to help organizations navigate digital transformation and integrate emerging technologies for the social good. Perfect panel, like a jigsaw puzzle coming together, extremely dense insight. We're going to have a discussion within the panel and then open up for questions later on. And I'm going to maybe sit down for the chairing. Daniela, I wonder if you can kick us off with some general thoughts on the topic of this panel. So you work at the intersection of technology and community benefits. And I wonder if you could walk us through a couple of challenges that you face there and maybe the benefits that are available.
Absolutely, very happy to do so. So we're a membership organization. Our members are non-profits. And they want to use technology in general for good, for helping with their purposes in development, in the humanitarian sector, and conservation. And the temptation can be big to apply technology without really reflecting on it, because you might be in a crisis situation, you don't have enough resources, you try to be as efficient and effective with your aid as you can. And that's really one of the biggest challenges already. It's this time to reflect the easiness of having tools available that, if not used with sufficient reflection, can do harm, especially to those communities we're trying to support. So one of the things we are doing, and it's been said on this stage already a few times, is capacity building. It's really making sure already those that work for our non-profit members are understanding AI and what it can do and what the risks are of using AI. And one of the things we're doing as part of that is really helping with very specific tool sets about how to implement and use AI and how you go about making sure it reflects and supports those communities you're working for. And that starts with things like user-centered design and making sure we have representation from those communities as part of that, that the use cases reflect them. It starts with making sure the data is representative of local communities and so on. So it's really that rigor about knowledge and the rigor about the methodology of implementing and using these tools that hopefully helps at least to ensure the involvement of communities in the process.
So I think I heard some useful buzzwords at the beginning, like representation and participation. Sennay, I wondered if I could bring you in here, kind of in your work, both as an academic and also as the director of the Civic AI Lab. What's like meaningful engagement from your perspective? Are these things that you can build on, or would you suggest further perspectives there?
Thanks for the question and for your input. I think representation and so these are, of course, important goals to achieve. For the key question is what is co-creation? There's a lot of buzzwords now going on around the concept of co-creation. It's not per se about representation or participation. To me, co-creation is grounded in equality, collaboration, partnerships on equal terms, scientists, citizens, civil servants, companies, and so on. So equality in terms of collaboration, reciprocality. People should benefit, communities should benefit, citizens should benefit, as well as governments, universities, and so on. And locality. I think the focus on locality, the focus on developing and using, co-creating AI in local context for local purposes are, in my experience, extremely important to really make something out of co-creation in the context of AI.
Okay, and that aspect of, that local focus, that is something that, is it something that you see as a particular challenge as well? Maybe from the perspective that it could lead, if it's not done well, you might impose on a community what they're not really identifying with or what doesn't resonate with their with the facts on the ground, as it were. Yeah.
I think that's a challenge. I mean, locality is a challenge at many different levels. For us as scientists, for example, locality, I've been developing AI technology for citizens, with citizens, in the context of use cases in Amsterdam. If you try to publish something about that, then immediately you get as a response from peer reviewers, but can that be generalized, right? So locality is also a challenge not only for developers, but also for scientists, and in some extent also for cities, municipalities themselves.
Ted, I want to push it a level higher because it seems now that this is something that we want, specificity and locality. But for governance, this could be a particular challenge because governance might rely on generality, or legal frameworks might rely on generality. What's your view on, how we could achieve meaningful co-creation or participation that is responsive to the specifics on the ground, but maybe it's also still loyal to the generality of governance?
Right. Great question. And I'm going to try to do justice to Irakli Khodeli's perspective, since I'm a last-minute substitute for Irakli, who would like to be here to offer you UNESCO's official perspective on these questions. I can give you a sort of unofficial, back-of-the-envelope perspective. But I think the point is this. UNESCO's work in this area is focused on its member states. UNESCO is a global organization composed of 200 or so, basically national member states. And the idea of making AI inclusive or participatory for UNESCO is to focus on each one of those member states having a national AI strategy, to leverage the benefits of AI, to mitigate the risks and to ensure that those risks and benefits are fairly distributed. So UNESCO puts the focus on individual states, but worldwide. And that's the sort of core of the UNESCO approach to participatory governance in AI.
Okay, good. I'd like to pause at that moment and bring in Randon. So it kind of seemed like, we are assuming there is the public. There's that thing that we can capture, right, when in fact maybe there might be fragmented opinions. Some of them are conflicting. Some of them are very well aligned with democratic values. Some of them might be a bit more, quote unquote, problematic. Right. So how would you approach that from your perspective as a sociologist, even when the public is such a complex beast?
Yeah, so thank you all for your responses so far. When it comes to the public and AI, there definitely is a public. I mean, the AI that we have now, the public fuels, of course, the data from the public fuels what drives AI. Every society is made up and comprised of multiple and conflicting views. So when it comes to AI, and when we think about how this may be complex, I want to think about it as not complex, but something like it's more diverse. And when we think about diversity, this is actually, it can be beneficial in many ways. So there's many different examples of how diversity is advantageous and also profitable. If we think about the age-old wisdom in stock portfolios, when you invest in stocks, I mean, the age-old wisdom says that you want to be diverse and to be able to lower your risk. If we think about the ecosystem, more biodiversity is going to make for a stronger and more resilient ecosystem. If we think about a team in a corporate setting, more diversity, more perspectives, and more different life experiences can enable us to attack and solve problems in more innovative ways. So when it comes to AI, diversity and different perspectives will enable us to. It will really enable us to tease out different types of bias that exist. So the public is always going to be comprised of different conflicting views, and I don't think there's ever been a time in which everybody in the public has been on one accord.
Patrick, now we've heard those different perspectives, from NGOs, academics, organizations. Now you bring the business perspective to this panel. So when you look at the public or maybe the customer, what's your take on their involvement?
Well, so I think it's early days for everybody involved in AI. I mean, yes, some of us have been in the field for a long time, and the field has been around since, 1950, but I still think that it's new, uncharted territory. And with that should come a certain level of humility in front of challenges. And I think from a business perspective, it's very inadvisable to sort of tell customers how to use AI, what technology stack to use, or what to push, or what use case to pursue. I think a much more viable way forward is inclusion and listen to what the business consumer or customer actually wants to see be achieved, right? And then you reverse engineer your way to make that a reality. That means that in every business transaction, there should be a level of co-creation, right? There's a need, and then there are possibilities to make that need converted into something profitable for both parties. So if you don't have that bilateral, unilateral, 2 ears, a single mouth approach, you will risk, just not hearing what is asked of you. And I think the businesses in AI have shown to be rather insensitive to customer demands or the public, if you will. I think it was a good point made earlier today on this stage, I think, where we say, well, in the unregulated US market, how is it that we only have 4 or 5 companies dictating 90% of a lot of the stuff that goes on? So the one ideology, non-regulation, hasn't gifted us with a radically inclusive culture in terms of business. And I think there are lessons to be learned there. So I think co-creation is the only way to make sure that we have sustainable AI over time.
Do you feel that you're in a privileged position to contribute to that co-creation from an industry perspective? When you compare your position to, let's say, someone working in governance, someone working for an NGO, or someone working in a different area?
Well, it was the French sociologist Jacques Ellul who said there are no political solutions, only technological ones. The rest is propaganda. And I think, I don't know if that's correct, but what we are privileged with, being a technology company, is that we actually create stuff that you can create other stuff with. We're like a manufacturer of dreams, if you will, but it's your dreams. And I think that's a privilege, because we are blessed with something much more simple to deal with, the technology, and the uses, it's a different ball game altogether.
Randon, I think you want to say something about that.
No, I'm just listening. I like how you brought in a sociologist, so you piqued my interest.
So maybe that's one advantage that you have. I mean, Ted, something that people often say about governance is that maybe it's not agile enough, it's not dynamic enough to really push things forward. What do you think about that? Is there anything or any part of the co-creation process that people in governance are particularly well placed to push?
Well, I mean, to repeat some of the things I said earlier today, I think to a certain extent the slowness of government is a benefit, right? Democracy takes time. We need time to reflect, we need time to study different alternative courses of action, to know what kinds of information we're making decisions on the basis of. And so the sort of slow pace of government is not always something to be regretted. Right? And at the same time, I think there are possibilities for political innovation that sometimes we overlook. We're not stuck with the same institutions that we've used for the past several hundred years. There are new, interesting experiments going on in civic tech, in democratic innovation, citizens' assemblies, deliberative polls, and I think AI is also a tool that can be used to facilitate some of those conversations, some of those forms of civic participation if we are careful about how we adapt this tool.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's an interesting point to bring you back in, Sennay, because I think the view that you both share is that AI isn't just, a cause for polarization and societal decline, but it's also a force for the good. So maybe you can walk us through some of your thoughts in that regard.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think I often refer to works of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian thinker, educator, change maker, who wrote the seminal book Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And he makes a distinction between the ethics of the market, centered around profit, power, hate, and so on, and the ethics of life, centered around justice, love, compassion, solidarity. And I think we've come to a time where we're using and building AI in the context of ethics of the market. And that brings a lot of dystopian thinking and so on about AI. One of the things that co-creation, engaging civil society, citizens, with all their diversity, is that it might help us get out of the ethics of the market into the ethics of life. And in many ways, AI could be a way, a motor, to go from ethics of the market to the ethics of life. So yes, I see a lot of harm being done by AI. I was myself very much focused on discrimination, bias, AI 15 years ago. But I also see what you can do with AI. AI for social good. And it takes time for people to see the harms, but also the benefits. And we're slowly shifting from seeing the harms to also seeing the benefits. But it requires imagination, like the previous speaker said. Thinking about the future. What is the society that we want to be? And how can we develop and use AI such that it helps us get there? Right? And that might mean also challenging the way we govern. Right? Perhaps the way we govern societies is completely different in 2050 compared to now.
Okay.
If that's a benefit, then it might be good to use AI to go there.
Okay. So I have a confession to make. My probably last 2 or 3 questions had a hidden agenda. So I wanted to turn you into the Justice League for the co-creation, to kind of get you to talk about how you're individually placed to make a contribution. So Daniela, I was wondering if I could come back to you on that point as well. In your work in that NGO, what do you think maybe your particular position, strengths, or even challenges are in that process of co-creation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are as a sector, we are of course targeted to doing good, right, and being ethical. But at the same time, we're also dependent on having those tools that help us doing what we do. So for us, I think, and that's a little bit to the point Patrick made earlier as well, we have a responsibility as organizations wielding this technology to do it with eyes wide open, and to be very solid as buyers as well, right? And as implementers, be very solid in what we wanted to do and what we do not want it to do, and take the role of representing those and make those we support part of that process to define what is it actually that we want from these tools, what do they need to do for us. So for me, that's an important role we can play, and then also come together as a sector and do things like our members, for example, created an humanitarian AI code of conduct. So that is agreeing on common frameworks that we will apply in our use of AI where we use it. It's pushing being part of the conversations on legislation in the EU and national governments. So there's all these things from our sector that we can do and should do and are doing.
Right, okay. Good. I think I'm getting a better understanding of the objectives and the good that we might aim for in public involvement in co-creation. I want to come back again to potential risks, Randon, and maybe think about ways in which things that we might need to do to avoid some kind of performative public involvement, doing it only for the sake of it. Or maybe also think about the presuppositions or conditions that are required. Do we need to maybe educate those groups that are involved? Or could it even be, a process where those in power delegate responsibility to the public and then say, well, it wasn't really us when things went wrong. So I wondered if you could share some of your thoughts on that, on these kinds of risks.
Yeah, so, this is something I write about in my postdoc, where I write about partnership and co-creation and democratization. I think and this has been written about in governance, public administration for decades. So I think one of the main things is to properly define what co-creation and partnership is, because there's probably hundreds or even thousands of papers where we see these, for lack of a better word, kind of fake measures of participation where the power holders are dictating to the community or the public what participation is supposed to look like, what we're going to do. But real participation is when the people who are going to be impacted are able to shape how the technology or policy is going to affect their lives. So if we don't have as a community, as a public, the ability to actually to co-decide in how it's going to affect us, it's not real participation. And without that, there's going to be more risk. We're not really listening. We're not really consulting fully. So I think that one of the best things to do is be authentic in how we approach the public, and like somebody just said, slow down a little bit. there's no rush. I understand the competition thing. I'm from the States. I mean, it's wild out there right now as far as regulation. It doesn't really exist. But yeah, just slow down and really go for real, authentic participation.
Patrick, can we make sense of that or integrate that from your perspective? I mean, I heard aim high, slow down. It's nothing that you hear very often in a business context. I mean, you need to get things out, you need to move fast, you need to be realistic. So I wonder, when we think about how to involve the public in a meaningful way, how do you approach that, like, pragmatically? Is it just about ensuring that the product will resonate with the customer, or is there like a more idealistic dimension that you have on your mind as well?
Well, so I'm sort of a pragmatic guy, and I sympathize with the need to slow down speed, because speed won't get you to where you want to go necessarily. It'll get you very fast in some direction, but it may not be the right direction. And you know how they say 9 out of 10 AI initiatives never hit production, or there are all these metrics where you see the AI that we deploy and make use of just hang a right, and we go like, oh, we don't even want that. Like there was the recall of the self-driving cars by General Motors, Cruise subsidiary in San Francisco, right? 950 of those were just pulled back. So when we run too fast, we don't get where we want. And I think a good example, and which sort of sets up a practical approach also to get at this, is remember during the pandemic there was this need to track spread or risk of spreading, and there was a risk mitigation technique, which was basically if people could just use the COVID trackers in their phones, if there was an outbreak, we can reverse engineer our way in terms of the network and figure out who's the patient zero, and we could mitigate that. And people were like, yeah, that sounds good, but I don't know, I don't want to be monitored. I don't want to be sort of, under that kind of control. I was at the Finnish consultancy around this time called Solita, and what they did, they developed the COVID tracker for Finland. And Finland is a small country. They were only 4 million people, right? After 24 hours after they released their COVID tracker, 1 million Finns had downloaded the tracker. And over another couple of days, 3 million of a total population of 4 million had adopted it. And the reason why the uptake and the usage of that tracker was so widespread was because it was completely done out in the open. It was open code, open source, participatory. Anybody who wanted to vet the code could have a say. It was out there in the public before they launched it, so everybody knew how we worked or how it handled data integrity issues. And I think that approach is a much more viable and a quicker route to market. So if you can set up whatever infrastructure you need to compute, and then you do it in an open way, so that when you superimpose software on that, you do that in a way that makes it possible for everybody involved to understand what they're doing together. And that is not the case of black boxes that you call into with an API. You don't get to know anything about the training or the underlying mechanisms, how it works. So again, if you bring back academics' view of transparency and peer review, you bring in openness, then you lower the hurdles for participation. And when you do that, all of a sudden the direction becomes clear, because that's the beauty of democracy, right? You don't have an end goal. You have this ongoing conversation. Like fascism is boring because it stipulates the vision. It's going to be like this, and then you look at it and go like, well, I don't want to go there. But democracy is open, and co-creation is as well. So you just need to make it very easy for people to participate. Through representation, for sure. If you don't see yourself in the boardroom, you're not going to go and apply for a boardroom job. So practical.
So we're coming almost to an end to the panel discussion. But before we open it up for Q&A to all of you, I've got one final question that will be the same for every panelist. I ask and I insist on a concise answer. But I'll also give you a joker card. If there's anything that you haven't mentioned but you burn to say, you can add that onto your answer to that question. So what I'm interested in hearing from you is if there is one change that you could immediately make, to ensure more meaningful engagement with the public, what would that be? And I suggest that we start with Daniela and then go around back to my seat, if that is okay.
No pressure then. For me, it's really, ultimately, you need to enforce this to happen, right? So for me, it's really creating those structured processes in every country that A, people get educated on AI, and B, there is a structured process around participation around how it is used and governed in the country.
Randon.
Ooh, okay, I got 30 seconds or something, or what? Okay, so look, I would say we cannot engage the public meaningfully without being authentic and transparent. I really do believe in how we frame the issues of AI. I think that if we frame it as more of like a public health preventive issue, you know, being transparent, co-creating with the public are preventive measures, the risk management measures, and they're going to help
So what's the one thing that drives then authenticity? I'm now mean, you know.
Yeah, it's good. Okay. I mean, just being honest. I mean, when I worked at Dell, when we couldn't get our bonuses years ago, they would tell us why, how the economy affected their bottom line. Just being transparent and honest, and approaching the public. That's it.
Ted.
I want to go back to the idea that I started with, which is that national governments play a really essential role as a conduit to the public, right? And so if I could change one thing, it would be that every national government around the world has a robust national strategy for leveraging AI and managing its ethical risks.
Great, thank you. Sennay.
Can I make use of the card?
Yes.
And respond to the last remark that you made, Patrick, saying that there is no end goal to which we can navigate. That's the way I interpreted your message. Yeah. I think we should define an end goal. And I think end goals such as AI with a good purpose, so focusing on solidarity, focusing on justice, those are the goals that we need to optimize for. Those are the goals that should direct the way we engage with AI from the elementary school up to the universities and in communities. So I think it's good not to leave it open, but to give direction in the way we engage, develop, monitor, deploy AI.
Was that instead of the final question or on top of the question?
That's instead of.
Instead of the Joker card. Yeah, I can do everything. Yeah. Okay, Patrick.
Restate the question? Restate the question.
So if there's one thing, one immediate change, one that he could make to make the involvement of the public more meaningful. So you could just do it by fiat. What would you do?
I would remove advertising as the underpinning of the internet.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because we all sort of go where the friction is the least. So we're gullible, or we're lazy, or we're humans, you know. So if we don't pay for the services we use, we consume the most weird services for absolutely no purpose and just rack up the energy bill and what have you, join the weirdest groups on Facebook. But if it costs, we go like, yeah, should I really go with a Spotify account or should I do Apple Music? And I want to pitch the two against each other. So there's a problem there.
So great. So you gave us proof that everyone's awake here, and that is, I think, a good place to start the Q&A. Please raise your hand until I nod at you. I think we have a microphone in the room. The gentleman in the first row is first to ask a question, and then I saw you. Yep. Please introduce yourself briefly and then ask a question.
My name is John Webber, working in space defense and normally in Brussels, thinking about what is fair. So my question to every one of you, if you're talking about what is the role for AI with the community, shouldn't we then not go from copyright to intellectual property of data? Because the copyright, you're having all fair that you're allowed to give all your data, and then it's closed, and then it's actually getting commercialized. But if there is a negative impact, that you're now no longer owner of your data. So you're helping, you ask people to help. Shouldn't that be then your intellectual property, so that if there is harm, that you can say, I retract my intellectual property?
Is there a designated addressee for that question?
Well, number 2, because he loves to...
Sennay? Yeah.
Yes, the activist.
Okay.
So we won't endorse that? But
I'm not sure what I'm active. I'm an academic and I'm an activist and I'm a human being, and that means that I focus on what is urgent for society to flourish. I do. That's correct, and I think that's what we also need: emotions in AI. So your question is on intellectual property, right? Who owns? Who owns the data? So again, there is a situation, the current state, and there is perhaps a desired state. In the desired state, everybody owns his own data, right? Data dignity, data ownership should be with people, should be with citizens. The big question is, how can we create an infrastructure, policies and so on to ensure that, right? And there are all kinds of initiatives going on, which I think should be motivated, should be funded to realize and implement data ownership with citizens, right?
Anyone else feels the urge to comment on that? Otherwise, good. So we'll proceed to the next question over there.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm working for the Artificial Intelligence Center Hamburg and on the side for Lufthansa Solutions and building like AI application for 15 years now. So I have a lot of practical experience, and for once, I think we all agree in this room, and I like this round, and it's nice to put the human into the center. Say, yeah, we want to have transparency, we want to have authenticity, we want to have all that, but I'm asking really, I want to get you to the point where you're saying, oh, how do we do the step now? Because you're saying transparency, you don't want to have the black box, but the point is AI is a black box. It's complex, and it's really, really difficult to explain it to average people, or even like to experts, what you're actually doing. And there's no technology out there who can really fix it at the moment, and it's even, I would guess, it will not come soon. So how can we get to this point, to get the transparency really to the people that are using it? And I think we need to work together there. And yeah, my question would be, how can we make this step together?
Can I answer? Okay, cool. So let me just say that there's a reason why most people are aware of the hype surrounding AI, its potential to maybe destroy the world, to kill all human beings, as opposed to the actual capabilities of AI, its potential risk and its potential benefits and harms. Now, this is what we call manufactured ignorance. We can educate people generally on what AI is. Not everybody has to be an expert. I mean, there was a time where cars were just built and not everybody knew how to drive a car. But I just kind of, it bothers me when, especially in the tech space where we have this division of like, the lay people don't know anything. It's hard to explain to them this and that. But if we just take the time and invest in education instead of investing in hype, then I think, we can have a better world.
Still awake. So we have a final question from the colleague over there in the back. Any other questions from the audience? Okay. Oh, wow. Good.
Hello, my name is Iman. I'm a responsible AI expert at LI. My question is directed to Mr. Sennay. I do subscribe to your definition of co-creation, but I'm very intrigued about the way you're approaching this topic, either thinking about it or practicing it, since I'm contributing at the moment at different EU and international collaborations working on the same topic. I would be eager to know who are the actors that are included in the process, at which level of the AI lifecycle stage, and who is doing what. I know that this can be extensive, but I would be glad to hear your point of view regarding that. Thank you.
For the sake of time, if you're part of LI, you're in the same building, Lab 42 as I am. One of the projects that we work on is Community. It's an EU project, bringing technology closer to marginalized groups. People from the municipality, City of Amsterdam, are also part of that consortium. Lots to talk about.
Good. Anyone else who'd like to answer that question or contribute some thoughts? Okay, so it's a gentleman with a blue shirt here. This will be our final question, I'm afraid. Was he first? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul.
Make it concise, please.
All
We're
right,
on the
all right,
clock.
okay. So my question to everyone that it is fantastic we are talking about this co-creation. So last 20 years of open internet, the data was basically given to, public data was given to the corporations, right? Now it's getting locked up. We can see it is all subscription based, everybody kind of paying to use that. Now the question is the AI being generated, the data, the generative AI, the data that coming out, the output, that is all our data, so to speak, right? So we don't have the ownership, but we are using it by paying it. So now from now onwards, that if we build a system that based on a data that where the human, we are normal people, sits in that panel, and then how we get the benefit out of it, and what would be the structure that we actually will be valued, not that we are building the product and training the product for the corporation, and corporation charges to use their own product, right? So how we put that, how we give the value back to the citizen, and what they actually, you know, in the position, how they sit, and what corporation need to do in order to get there.
Thank you very much. So that it wasn't quite concise enough. We have now run out of time. So I suggest you will be promoted to the most privileged person to talk to any of the panelists afterwards. But now I feel compelled that I first have to thank the panelists personally for the contributions and everything. It was a pleasure to meet you and discuss these things with you, and then ask you to join me in thanking these speakers with a warm round of applause.